to Season 5 of the Hey Girl podcast with your host and my mom, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear from some incredible new guests, and we're bringing back some of our faves. Each guest will share their story of running their race in their place, and we hope they inspire you to do the same. If you want more information or to connect with my mom, go follow our new Instagram at HeyGirlGram, friend us on Facebook at HeyGirlPod, or even better, join our brand new Patreon to get bonus materials, hang with my mom, and you get to help Hey Girl continue to grow and reach more people. That's pretty cool. All right, time to grab that seltzer and maybe a tissue box just in case. Here's my mom.
Hey girls, and welcome to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. In this week's episode, I get to introduce you to a brand new friend, Krissie Garland. Krissie came as a recommendation, highly recommended, I should say, by a dear friend. And it was an incredible privilege to sit down and hear Krissie's story. I cannot wait to share it with you today. I do want to say, for whatever reason, God seems to have brought so many people into our lives this year, sharing their stories on Hey Girl that have themselves or people they love wrestled with different areas of mental illness, suicidal ideation, just some really hard things. And so I do like to give the forewarning before we get into an episode that we're going to be talking about some hard things. Krissie's story is beautiful, but there's a lot of hurt and pain. She's walked through some very hard things. And so before we jump in, I always want to throw this out there, because I never know who's listening. If you're listening today, you listen to this story and you or somebody that you love is struggling in this area, specifically as we're going to talk about suicide in this story, I want to give you this number, 1-800-273-8255. Guys, it's a national suicide prevention lifeline. It's a 24-hour number you can call at any point, and just know, no matter where you are, no matter how alone you might feel, that help is out there. And I want to encourage you, if you're listening today, you need to speak to someone. That number is one for you. And also, if it's just you need a friend to talk to, I appreciate those who have reached out. We continue to be here and would love to talk to you, to hear from you. I know Krissie as well has said if anyone wants to reach out to her, she's happy to talk. I'm so grateful for Krissie's willingness to come on today to share her story. And man, I wish I lived closer to really get to know her in real life. But for now, without further ado, I'm just so honored to introduce you to my new friend, Krissie Garland. Okay, listeners, I am excited and I feel super blessed because I get to be like a listener again this week, meaning that our guest today, Krissie Garland, is someone that I just met face-to-face via Zoom. We've not met before. You came highly recommended through a mutual friend. I'm pumped to get to sit down and to hear your story, and then to also get to share your story with our listeners. So first, welcome to Hey Girl, Krissie.
Thank you so much. It's really fun that y'all asked me, and I'm glad just to be able to talk with you today.
Love it. And I love your the slight Southern twang.
You can hear it. Uh-oh.
I can. I'm just so excited right now.
I'm sure it'll come out throughout the whole thing. So sorry about that ahead of time.
I hope so.
Okay.
So Krissie, for those who, like me, have never met you before, why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, like you said, my name is Krissie Garland, and I live in Tyler, Texas, born and raised in Texas. I am also a mom. I have 3-year-old twins, boy-girl twins, Joa and Selah, and they are crazy. I mean, they are just everywhere all the time, learning and growing and keeping me very busy. But they're the lights of my life. And as you will hear my story today, you'll just see why they have been such a huge blessing. So I'm a mom. I'm also a licensed counselor. I grew up a pastor's kid, and I gave my life to Jesus at 6. And then at age 16, I was called into ministry. I knew there was nothing else that the Lord wanted me to do with my life except to be in ministry. And I didn't know exactly what that looked like. And I kind of joke with people when I tell them that, because I really thought God was going to lead me into being like the next Sandy Patty, which so many people don't know who Sandy Patty is right now. And I'm like, what? She was amazing. She is amazing. But I thought that's what the Lord had for me. And
we had her daughter on Hey Girl.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Shout out.
I know. Jen Kreider, hear that? Your mom just got a shout out.
Yes. I mean, she's amazing. And I just thought that's what God had planned for my life. And I loved music. I loved serving the Lord, and went to college for music, and really just, and this goes into my testimony too. So when you ask, tell us a little bit about yourself, sometimes I give really long answers. So
love it. I love it.
So when I went to college for music, and then when I was in my last year of college, I actually lost my voice. Turns out I had a cancer scare. I had a cyst in my throat that they had to remove. I was told I'd never sing again, and I probably wouldn't get to speak again. And I remember feeling, that was the first feeling I had of just abandonment, and wondering where God went and what God was doing, and really set the tone for my relationship with the Lord. Years later, when I was in college, when I felt like I'd lost everything I loved and knew. But what I didn't know is that God was working it out for good. And the neat thing was, he did give my voice back, but that's not what he wanted me to use my voice for. He wanted me to use it for counseling. And he gave me a period of time where I had to be silent. I didn't get to talk. I just listened to people's stories like you do. And I found the value in that, and the blessing in that. In that time of silence is when the Lord called me into counseling. And so I went to grad school, and that's where I met my amazing husband, who was a pastor and finishing up his graduate work. Then after grad school, I started doing counseling, and I still do it today. So.
Wow. So side note, is singing something that you do anymore, or is it like, because I know sometimes you can get your speaking voice back, but not necessarily be able to sing.
Yes. So the cool thing is that God has opened doors and allowed me to still sing. And it's from a different place than it was before. Before it was like, this is what I'm good at, and this is what God has called me to, and this is going to be my profession. But now it's just, this is a gift from God, a sweet gift from God. And every opportunity I get to use it, whether it be in church or singing for weddings or funerals or different events like that, it's just an additional gift from the Lord. And so to answer your question, yes, I still sing. I'm not Sandy Patty.
None of us are.
I know. But just to be able to give that gift back to the Lord, just to simply worship him, is better than what I ever had before I lost it. So.
Oh man, I love that. So we are a women's podcast. Unashamedly, I love to hear the how I met my husband stories.
Okay.
So I know you mentioned very briefly, but tell me about where and how did you meet your husband?
Okay, so this is probably where our connection comes in, because my husband is from he was from New England, and we met in grad school in Texas. He became a Texan all the way from upstate New York, and he was going to seminary where he was studying to be a pastor. And so we were both at seminary together, and I was in my graduate program for marriage and family counseling. And apparently he worked in the admissions office. And so I didn't know who he was, but he knew who I was. And then this guy just started showing up at all my classes, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, I see him everywhere. And and then he started following me on Facebook and writing me. And I've had found out later he was actually stalking me. But so that's kind of how we met and how he let himself be known. And as soon as we started talking, we hit it off. I loved him pretty quickly because he was just full of life and passion and heart for the Lord. We just had a blast together. And so we got married. I had graduated seminary. He was still in it. We got married and he was serving at a church. And yeah, so we just were ready to conquer the world back in 2011.
So admissions was how he like knew of you. Did you have like some amazing admissions paper that he's like, I'm going to marry this woman?
No, from what I've heard, he saw me in the cafeteria and then he went back to his office and looked me up. So
okay, I gotcha.
So he knew everything, even my grades. He said, I even knew all your grades. I'm sorry. So, yeah, it should have been creepy, but for some reason it wasn't.
It's like romantic in a creepy sort of way.
Yeah. What can I say? What does that say about me? I like weirdos.
It's fine. It's fine. We're all weird. It's just some of us are more obvious than others.
Yeah. Yes, that is so true.
At the Mustard Seed Marketplace, they believe that your purchase makes a powerful impact, whether it's providing jobs for overcomers of sex trafficking or supporting small businesses. They want you to be able to shop the causes that you care most about. They're passionate about bringing you on-trend items with a greater purpose. Enjoy shopping their handmade creations from near and far as they create a marketplace for artisans around the globe. They've curated a collection of world-changing jewelry, apparel, handbags, and more for over 40 groups in over 15 countries. And every single item is fair trade, locally made, or give back brands. You can use our code HeyGirl15 for 15% off your entire purchase at themustardseedmarketplace.com. Now, this is a one-time use code. Again, HeyGirl15 for 15% off. Guys, the Mustard Seed Marketplace has so many great options for gift giving. This is the perfect time to start shopping for the holidays. Now, be sure to find them on Facebook and Instagram and check out their website often as they're always getting new pieces. So once again, that's themustardseedmarketplace.com. Use our code HeyGirl15 for 15% off your entire purchase. And take this holiday to purchase gifts that make an incredible impact to people all around the globe. So obviously you mentioned you have twins now, but I know, because I know enough of your story from my friend, that this hasn't been smooth sailing by any means, leaving college. So why don't you take some time and tell us your story from when you're married, you mentioned being in a church ministry, to kind of what leads us to today.
Like I had said, when I lost my voice, that was really a pivotal point in my life of really understanding who God was, his character, who he was in my life personally, and really what it was like to suffer and really come to grips with what my faith means. And so that was really the first time I experienced pain and heartache, was then. And like I said, it was pivotal because it really set me up for a lot of other things that would happen later on in life. So like I said, my husband and I had big dreams. We were going into church ministry. We were doing exactly what we felt called to do, what we loved to do. And just like many people can relate, we had a plan for our lives. We would get married, we'd do ministry, we'd have kids, and we'd just serve the Lord and everything would be great. And I think it really hit us hard when these heartaches and these different things came into our lives. And ministry wasn't easy. Working with people is hard in any setting, but it was especially challenging in the ministry. We didn't have those first years. We had some very difficult ministry experiences and learned a lot. And then we found out that we couldn't have children. And we had tried for 5 years, and it was just heartbreaking. Miscarriages, and really one miscarriage that went in the second trimester that just broke us completely. And just a lot of questioning, like, God, this is not who we thought you were. This is not where we thought we'd be in life. This is not what we thought church ministry would look like. And really our whole world and Christian worldview shattered. And we had to go to really the foot of the cross and reevaluate and reexamine what we believed, how we were going to move forward with each heartbreak that came our way. And I don't know if you want me to go into anything after that, or
first of
God
all, I
did
think
give us our children.
I was going to say they're twins, so
we did have children. So we went into this just time of fasting and prayer and reaching out to people and asking, like, pray for us. And we ended up doing, because I was told I couldn't, I had a very, they didn't know why, but they just didn't feel like I had a high percentage of getting pregnant. They told me I had a 3% chance. So we started this prayer initiative called 3%, just really went for it and ended up doing IVF. And getting our amazing twins from it right off the bat. I mean, it was just so quick. And we called, and I still call them, our abundantly mores. They were abundantly more than we could have asked or imagined. And God didn't just give us one, he gave us two. And that's why they're so important in my life. Again, God's gifting to us when we didn't deserve it. We didn't expect it. But we prayed for it, and it wasn't our plan, but God was like, oh, here you go. I'm going to give you twins, and it's not going to be anything you expected it to be like. So they're my abundantly mores.
And how old did you say they are now?
They're 3.5.
3.5. Wow.
Yeah.
So since they've been born, I know that you mentioned very early on in the interview that they have been a source of, they've been joy, a gift, all of these things. But even after infertility, there was obviously still a difficult journey that God has walked you through. As much as you're comfortable, can you share with us some of what that's been these last few years with your husband, and obviously now a mama of twins?
So like I had said, life didn't really look like we thought it would. Ministry was very difficult. And I married a man who loved life to the fullest. Anyone who knows him, I think you say his name and they just smile, because he was just outgoing and fun and loved everybody. I mean, he could walk into a room and make friends in a heartbeat. And I remember we'd always go to restaurants, and it was like he would immediately be friends with our waiter or waitress, and then he'd be praying for them at the end of the meal. Like, that was my husband. But there was a part of our life that we didn't share, and that was the fact that he struggled with depression. He struggled with clinical depression and anxiety, and in addition to that, he struggled with not feeling good enough. I mean, he grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a Christian home, and we kind of learned from a young age, if there's a problem, then immediately something's wrong with us, and we don't talk about it. And if we did talk about it, it would put shame on ourselves. It might put shame on our families. And so, and I think that's a lot of Christians' beliefs. And I don't know where that comes from necessarily. I'm still trying to figure that out, but we feel like there's shame in experiencing these things. So he struggled a lot, just feeling like he wasn't perfect. So therefore something was wrong with him, or that God didn't love him. And I think we both grew up in Christian homes, and we both, from a young age, just learned if we talked about these things, if we talked about our struggles, then something was wrong with us. Then we would feel shamed for it, or that our families would feel shame for it. So I don't think our parents even meant that. I think it's just as believers from a young age, we just start to think that if we're not perfect, if we don't have this face of we have it all together, then something is wrong with us. And Eric experienced that to the fullest. He felt like maybe he didn't love God enough, or maybe God didn't love him enough, or what was he doing wrong, because he struggled with these things. And that really defeated him. And as we continued in ministry, and he would get in trouble from his pastor for something, or he internalized something that really probably wasn't as big of a deal, but he felt it as something so personal. His depression just became worse and worse. And so with the clinical depression, with these feelings of not feeling good enough, feeling like something was wrong with him because he was experiencing these things, it just got worse and worse. And then you pile on top of it the hardships of life that we go through. So when we lost our child, goodness, that was back in 2015, our baby girl in the second trimester, I remember something really clicked in him, and he just couldn't understand why a good, loving God would allow something like that to happen. And he was a pastor at the time, but he tried to talk to his pastor at the time. And it was just like, pray about it. And that's great. Yeah, we prayed about it constantly, but he never could reconcile in his mind the pain he felt from that tragedy, from that loss, from that trauma, and make it fit with his faith and make it fit with his clinical depression. And he really spiraled from there, which turned into just a lot of pain, a lot of silent pain. And you take this guy who's full of life and love, and you watch him dwindle and you try everything. Like you're trying to make it okay and figure it out and live life. And it just didn't come back. And so shortly, I think it was about a year and a half after that, he found something that eased his pain for a little while. And sometimes, I'll kind of add this too, sometimes when we don't talk about what's going on and when we keep the pain inside, it comes out in physical ways. Like we think we're good at hiding it, but your body can't hide it. And so he started to get shingles, and he was only in his 20s when that happened. And that's very rare.
Wow.
And then at, I think he was 30 when he was diagnosed with cancer. And that was devastating. And during all of this, like I said, he found something that helped, and that was painkillers. And he found that these opioids that he was taking for his shingles, that he was taking for his cancer to help with the pain, actually helped him a little bit with his inner pain. And that's the sad reality, is it did for a little while, and he became addicted to those. And so, but just like anything, it only lasted a little while, because it was not of the Lord. It was not of the Lord. And he knew that. And it really put us in a really bad place within ministry, because it's not like he could tell anybody. Just like depression, anxiety, he's not about to tell anybody about his addiction. But the same week we found out about his cancer, we found out about his addiction, and he sought help. And he resigned from his church job, because no one wants a pastor who struggles with addiction. And I wish I could say the church stood by us and loved us through that. And that's hard, because I believe in the church. I believe it's God's people, and I will serve it. But that's our reality too, as our church didn't. And we are kind of left outside in the cold, trying to navigate these tough life experiences on our own with very little community. And it just keeps going from there. He did get clean. And I'm so thankful for that. But because he wasn't accepted back into his community, because of his depression and his insecurities, he fought really hard, but he couldn't. And I remember we did finally get back into ministry, and that last church told us, great, we love having you. We will love and support you, but do not tell anybody about your mental illness or your past addiction. Like, people don't want to know about that. Like, you're good now, move forward. Let's not talk about it. And we were like, this is not the gospel that we know. The gospel, like, Jesus died for us when we were at our worst, not when we could present our best, but when we were at our worst. And that's, as believers, as Christians, as church leaders, we wanted to put that into practice for other people. And so again, just another hard situation. And he eventually was let go because he did talk about it. He did share about it and immediately let go. And our insurance was taken away, kicked out to the street pretty much. And he was unable to take his meds because we couldn't afford them. And that just led to kind of a spiral where about a month after that, my husband, the one I talk about, sorry.
It's okay.
The same man, he was the same man. He ended up taking his life in January of 2019 after all of that. And of course, there's details in there. Days he fought really hard and thought he had hope and thought it was going to be great. And then days where he attempted and tried to take his life and chose not to or was unsuccessful. But that day I remember it so well because he was really down, but he kissed our babies and he said, see you later. And he walked out the door. And so here we are, a year and a half. Actually, it's almost 2 years out since he took his life. And my whole life since then has been fighting the stigma, but really fighting for the gospel. Like, I want to say I am definitely a mental health advocate. I think people need to get help. I will spend the rest of my life trying to educate Christians and believers and church leaders about the importance of addressing these issues and seeing them as more than just a spiritual issue, but as a physical issue, and one that the church needs to address and understand and partner with medical professionals. But my heart will always be the gospel, that no matter if you're a pastor or if you're just someone on the side of the road who's lived a really hard life, like, the gospel applies to all of us. That doesn't change because you struggle with mental illness or you struggle with addiction or whatever someone may struggle with. That doesn't change. The gospel doesn't change. And that has been my message since he died, because that would be his message today if he were here. So, sorry, I get a little passionate about it.
No, I mean, honestly, you are speaking so much of my heartbeat, and especially in recent years, I share very openly on Hey Girl, maybe too openly, about my own battles with mental illness and journey with depression and anxiety, and even my family, just the history of it. Yeah. And, I grew up a pastor's kid, like, kind of similar thing, growing up in an environment where there was a broad spectrum of response and beliefs around mental illness, from there being a sin issue in your life that, undealt with, to, like you mentioned, just have enough faith and pray and it'll go away, to people along the journey who have in fact taught me so much about just what you've been talking about, and having a lot of grace and love and compassion. And I'm with you. I feel so strongly hearing your husband's story, just like it tears at my heartstrings, because I know that it's not just his story, like, that there are so many people out there that feel isolated and silenced and shamed and all of these things. And as you're teaching, I literally just want to be like, yes, because I feel the same way. I'm like, I will keep talking about this until I'm blue in the face and be downright awkward and way too open about it. If it helps one person who feels like, okay, not only am I not alone, but, it's one thing to connect with another person, but to be reminded that God will meet you in that place. He's not waiting for you to get to the other side, to figure it out, to clean it up, whatever you have in your brain, but that he's there, even in that darkness, that you have not gotten out of his reach. And that's a hard thing and a dark place to remember. But I think, man, if more of us would talk about this like out loud, and I think we would be shocked at how many people wrestle with this. Like, yeah.
A part of my heart behind sharing is when he died, I waited for some kind of note, some kind of explanation to try to fit a piece that will never fit into what happened. But I got his phone back days after, and I found something he had written just days before, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was just his heart to the Lord, and how he was like, God, use this, like, use it. And I found later on, he had written so much about what he wanted to share and how he wanted to help people through his addiction, through his confusion. Like I said, reconciling his faith with what was going on in his brain and his feelings. And he wanted to help a hurting world. And I found all his writings after, and I was like, okay, God, like, I'm a nobody. Like I always say, I'm a small fish in a big pond. But if you want me to make some waves, then I'll do it. And he should be the one. He should have been allowed to share sooner. I think if he would have shared sooner, if he was allowed to live in the freedom that the gospel gives us, and he felt that, and he was encouraged in that direction, then he might still be alive. But he was asked not to. And I find his writings now, and they're just so beautiful. And so I remember when I found that, I was like, okay, God, I'm going to make some waves. And I decided to start a rinky-dink blog, just sharing like, hey, here's his writings, and here's what we need to be doing, and here's the change. And even if I'm a small fish and it starts with a ripple, then I'm going to be a part of the conversation and a part of the change. And so I started writing on my blog, and then I just started getting stories of people who read it from all over the world. It was crazy. And who said, I didn't take my life today. Or I got one from someone from his past that he had shared Jesus with, who said, I gave my life to Jesus today. After reading that, and I thought, holy crap, like, God, like, if you were here and he were sharing, how much more would you have used him? But it's me, and I'm okay with that. And I'm thankful that the Lord uses it. And I do pray it continues to save lives, and it encourages people to get help, or just to say it out loud if they haven't yet. Like, this is something I struggle with, and I'm not ashamed, and I'm not going to keep it in darkness anymore. I'm going to bring it to light. I'm going to get help for it, and let God just shine his light on it, not to shine shame on it, but to shine his redemptive work on it. So
I think two of the most powerful tools of the enemy is silence and isolation, or darkness and isolation. And I just think the more you study and you even understanding mental illness, when I know for me, when I'm in not a good space, my instinct is those things. I want to pull away, and I want to shut down, and realizing that that's exactly, like, that's how the enemy likes to work. And sometimes people don't necessarily, it's not always malicious from people, but they're feeding that, like that. Okay, just don't talk about don't talk about that. And I just think if we could speak up and press in those places where the enemy would love to silence us and push us out. And you're right. I think there's power in the vulnerability in the community of that. And I have honestly in the last few years seen a change in this, but I feel like if anything, we have so far to go, because it's that recognition of people. There's still people, like, as you're sharing your husband's story, I'm thinking, I can't believe this was just in these last few years, that there are people, that there are churches out there. And I know that it's true, but it's still just like, I don't know whether to feel angry or just like fueled to keep going, that there would be a church out there that would tell a pastor, like, don't talk about your mental illness. Don't talk about wrestlings with addiction. It breaks my heart, because I'm like, people are longing for real. They're longing for people to tell their real story, because they want to know that the gospel is true for them, not just true for shiny Christians who look like they have it all together.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Like you said, the conversation has become more prevalent in the last year. And I think it's because a lot of pastors are taking their lives, and people are confused and asking why. And I think a lot of us who have struggled with depression or mental illness issues know why, but we need to educate. We need to understand. We need to understand it personally in our own lives if we struggle with it. But we also want to know that the church and that people around us are going to love and accept us and be there for us when we do talk about it, and we should talk about it. And I now work for an organization called Care for Pastors, and that's all we do is we provide counseling and resources to pastoral families, a safe place for them to come and get the help they need. And yes, it's biblical counseling, it's Christian counseling, it's also clinical counseling. And sometimes we will say, hey, go see your doctor. I think this is something more serious than, beyond what talk therapy could do or something like that. And all of that is okay. And that's part of the education is letting people know you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay. You need to share about it, but you also need to be willing to help, because God gives us resources to get the help we need. And we've heard this time and time again. When someone has cancer, my husband had cancer. He went and got help. Like he had medicine, and he had surgery and doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments. And yeah, we prayed. Prayer was throughout it all, and scripture and God's truth was throughout it all, but also utilizing God's resources was too. And so that's what I really I want to educate the church and these, especially church leaders, in understanding this. And it starts with them.
Yeah, I think too, as you're talking, I'm just, one of the things that I take for granted, I think sometimes because of my own journey and story and mental illness, some things that just aren't clear to like what things look like versus the reality of them. And when it comes to things like addiction and even suicidal ideation, we often jump to think that those things are selfish things, that this is somebody that's being selfish, that they're stuck in their own head, whatever. And sometimes, I'm sure there are some scenarios where that could be said. I don't know, but many times. Yeah. My experience on a whole with a lot of people that I have met that are wrestling with addiction, are walking, struggle with this suicidal ideation. A lot of it are people that give their lives to serving other people that are taking on a lot of what other people are wrestling with, but don't feel like they have that. So they're taking on, but they themselves, like there's this lack of community and support, and or they, like you said, they haven't sought help. And so in a weird way, what people perceive of like, oh, alcohol addiction, or even like sexual addiction, drug addiction, whatever it is, these aren't always just like selfish, self-indulgent people. These are broken and hurting and searching people. And we may not understand, like you may not look at it and be like, well, why would they, you don't have to understand why, but just understand that, or don't understand the what, but understand the why is all of us at some level have felt that to some extent. And these people are literally at this point of desperation where they need us more than ever. They need us to step in. And like you said, to bring that gospel truth that even in that, like while we were yet sinners, and there was no limit on that. God didn't give up to this point, like he's there. And because of that, and because I want to follow him, I'm there too. Like I'm there with you. We're going to sit here but also I want to walk with you, like move forward. And it's not clean. It's a messy, addiction is messy. Suicidal ideation is not a one-time wrestling. It's messy. You've shared, obviously a heart-wrenching story of how though that can end for some people. And then there are some, I know we had a girl on here recently for Hey Girl that that's part of her story, is that she is in therapy and working through those feelings and thoughts. And I appreciate so much, Krissie, your willingness to just be open and just your courage and commitment to continue share. Cause you could easily just walk, all right, I need to put this all behind me but I love that picture that God doesn't waste our hurt when we lay it at his feet. And I feel like your story is such an example of that God isn't going to waste this hurt and this hardship that already he's using it to save lives. And I know that doesn't make it easier for what you have to walk through, but there's something that's beautiful in the redemption of that along the way.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And there's so much, I mean, you could continue this conversation forever. I know I could just go on because every person's story is different. But if I were to just encourage anyone who hears this, who listens to this, yes, my story seems like it ends in heartache, but it will always end in hope. And even though I lost my husband to suicide, I have hope because he loved Jesus. He believed in Jesus, and he sits with Jesus now. And I have that hope. And that's part of that. Like nothing separates us from the love of God. It does not. And yet, even though he took his life, God meant him to be here. And so if you're questioning that and you think, I can't take one more day, I can't live one more day, and you're listening to this and you're thinking this will not get better, I can't promise you when it will get better. I can tell you it'll make sense. And some days will be hard and some days will be great. And maybe this life will always struggle. I think we all will. That's part of living in this broken world is we will struggle. But God has not given up on you. He has not. He will not. And even in the depths of pain and sorrow and heartbreak, you have to trust that and believe that and choose to live. And I just want to encourage you. And if you are battling depression or addiction, you're not beyond hope. You're not. And if you feel like you are, reach out to me, reach out to this podcast. And I just pray that God surrounds you with community that reminds you of those truths, because that is the truth. At the end of the day, that's the truth. You are here for a reason. You breathe for a reason. And what you face and struggle with on this earth will not last forever. It will not.
Amen. Well, I love that note to end on. Just for those who are listening and do want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Okay, so that's a good question. I mean, you can reach out to me on my blog, Instagram, Facebook. Those are probably the best ways. What I love, I can't always get to you right away, and I overcommit myself all the time. But what I can do is I have collected a list of resources, and it's actually going to be on my new blog that's coming out next month. All these resources you can plug into to see how and where you can get help, and affordable Christian counseling and medical help and things like that. So even if I couldn't personally counsel you, obviously I have those in hand to pass along, because I think that's what we as a community do, as believers do, is, hey, I may not can help you. I would love to hear your story, but I will definitely plug you in somewhere that can. And if you just want to just send me your story, I love reading them. I love hearing about people's lives. It is an honor of mine. So if someone wants to do that, it's Krissie Lane Garland on both Facebook and Instagram, and then KrissieJoy.com for my blog.
Awesome. Well, Krissie, thank you again so much for being willing to come on and for sharing your story with us.